From here. Sudachi. Hey. Good. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I want to sort of focus this class around power generation, right? And so the idea, and sort of unusual ways that are not commonly focused on, but we learn them, probably without knowing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, the first part of the class is going to be looking at power generation from the hips. This should all be review for everyone who's trained, right, for a decent amount of time. And then what I want to do is I want to focus in on the 3 Tekki kata, and if you don't know them, don't panic. We're only doing the first couple of moves of 3, or of those 3 kata, and talk about alternative ways that they teach you to generate power. And we'll talk about why the Tekkis sort of do that and how they do that. Sound like a plan? Okay, rock and roll. Hey, from here, arms forward. Good, backwards. Good, out and back. Out and in. Right, rolling over. Switch. Switch. And switch. Good, just rolling forward. Over the left. And to the right. Good, Zenkutsu. Dropping down. Ball of foot. Good, knee down and step down, hand down and just roll up. Roll it over. Good, Zenkutsu. Ball foot. Dropping down, knee down, and step down, toe heel out, and just let the hip drop. Good, switch over, heel. Good, now, hips, nice big circles. Other way. Good, instep. Switch. Good, over to a wall. Stretch out your calves. Switch. Switch. From here, just bend the knee, so just release the hip, release the knee, bend down on the ankle a little deeper. You should feel the stretch transfer from the top of your calf down into your Achilles tendon. Switch. If you're like me and Dr. Stiff Ankles, this is one way to help get at that. Good, switching under. And switch. Good, and up. One more time, hips round. Just make sure you got synovial fluid running. Other way. Good. Just loosen off anything else that needs loosening. Just going to take off the waiting room. And close that so I can see you all. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. So what we're going to do today is I want to focus in and look at sort of power generation, right? We spend a lot of time in karate, especially at the beginning parts, really thinking about, or when you're starting off, really thinking about shapes, right, of arms and legs and all this. But what I want to get at today is really, and we say, you know, use the hips, make your hips lower, all of these kinds of blah, 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 flapping your lips kind of statements. What I want to do today is really talk about the sort of nuts and bolts of some of that power generation, and then from there, sort of expand it out to some different kinds that are really not taught widely, right? Or at least thought about as widely as what perhaps they should. So where this class comes about was when I wrote my book a bunch of years ago, 5-6 years ago now, I focused on the classic JK methods of producing power using your hips. And one of the things that the publishers had a Goju-Ryu guy actually look at it, and he went, well, you know, there are other methods. And so, you know, this is really that combination of thinking about different things, having conversations with Matt, of course, who's here, having conversations with other people about how to do that. And what I want to do is I want to focus in especially on how the Tekki kata really teach you to do that, how they give you that ability, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start off just with a nice little warm-up drill. We're going to break it down a little bit, okay, as we go and talk about the classic methods of power generation. So from here, just make your way. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it, first of all, I'm going to do it with my best side forward, this side, and then I'll flip round as we get it. It's about sort of 5 or 6 steps. You're going to need room to basically step one forward. So from here, just make kamae. Right, so my left hand is out. From here, just make chokuzuki, so just punch with the right hand, keep it soft, relaxed, you're warming up. Ich, boom. Now with the right, knee. Now from here, circle down with your right hand, down to your left side. Zen kutsudachi, gyakuzuki, sam. Good, now from here, rotate the hip back, make agyuke, ich. Then from here, drive forward, making gyakuzuki, ni. Good, now from here, right hand's out, just drive forward with your right side, gerambarai, moving towards the back of the room. Ich. Then from here, oizuki through, stepping forward, lunge punch. Shi. Good, then from here, just come up, right hand out this time. You may need to take 2 steps back just to get back to your starting position. From here, punch, punch, rotate down, this time of course to our right. Ich, agyuke, gyakuzuki, rotating out, left hand. Ich, gerambarai, stepping forward. Good, and from here, stepping up, left hand out. Everyone kind of got the idea? Let's try again, a few more times. Hey, no speed, no power, just relax. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good, and up, 1, 2, out right hand. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good. Left hand out. Okay, let me watch you all. Hey, I'm going to start with my right, you've got your left. We're just mirroring you. I've turned into an aerobics instructor, right? I can do things in the same direction as you. Ready? Hey. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good, and up. Opposite hand out. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good, and up. Okay, let me just watch. Hey, ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good, and up. One more, our last side. Hey, ich, ni, sam, shi, go, Rok. Shich. Good, amen. Excellent. So when you do any standard sort of, if you look even within the ISKF instructor training classes, right, they talk about 3 ways to generate power from the hips, right? So the translation, rotation and vibration, right? So they talk about these 3 ways. Okay, so when we look at this drill, it covers all 3 ways. Okay, this is the idea. So what we have here is we have, of course, vibration. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We have rotation, 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 and of course we have translation at the end, right? So we have all 3 ways encompassed in a very simple drill. So the purpose of this, the purpose and the reason why we generate power with our hips is simply to move our body center into a target. That's its point, right? If it's going in another direction other than towards our target or in a circular motion towards the target, if it's not bridging that gap and driving my massive fat 190 pounds into it, I'm wasting my time. So let's start with vibration to start off with. And what we're going to do is we're going to do it 2 ways just for fun. So you can either do it with a gyakuzuki feel or you can do it with an oizuki feel. And I don't care which, this is your training. I'll show you both, you can play with both. And it really comes about as to which leg and which hand is doing the driving, which is doing the punch. So from here, we're in a very beside-eye kind of feel, right? We're in this idea of 1 hip forward, 1 back, stretch this way. What you want to think about here is if I'm going to make a classic gyakuzuki type feeling, that means this leg and this hand are driving together. And this is the classic sort of chokuzuki that you see most of the time. It'll be here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive off this leg, which is going to push this forward in front, and this hand is going to go with it. When I fire the next punch, and notice my hips ever so slightly off center, that's okay, they don't have to be square. You've just pushed off this leg. Now when I do the second punch, this bum fires, right? I push off the floor again, and there's my rotation. So it ends up being this very slight coupled rotation, rotation. Very slight. Now I'm not saying this, Kazamazuki, different, right? Gyakuzuki feel, here to square in, here to square in, this feeling, right? So it's very, very subtle, very relaxed. That's a Gyakuzuki feel. Here, in, here, in. Okay? Let's try that. Just for the thing, we're going to go through the whole drill, but for this, try Gyakuzuki feel. Think about the connection. As you go, think of driving off the floor with your hip. Here, drive, push. So my hip, and thus my body center, is making a micro rotation and pushing into the target, just slightly. Okay, ready? Hey. So just, we're going to do all the moves, really think about these first 2 right now. Hey, so here, stretch, push, not off your arms, but legs, leg, push, push. Ich, knee, good. Now from here, just driving around. San, shi, go, rok, chich. Good, enough. Opposite side. Ich, knee, sam, shi, go, rok, chich. Good, enough. So one quick comment, we're going to do it again. Something to think about. When I want to hit somebody, I don't want to disconnect my fatness from walking into the target from the fist hitting. So don't, my hips ran out of space, empty. Make sure your hip and arm all the way through the technique. Otherwise, it's like doing gyakuzuki like this. It's empty. You want them both together all the way through. So this, much shorter distance, right? It's only moving a couple of inches. So you're going to move your hands really freaking fast to get it within that little bit of hip action, yeah? Again, ready? Hey. Ich, knee, sam, shi, go, rok, chich. Good, enough. Opposite hand. Think, timing. Ich, knee, Sam, shi, go, rok, shi. Good, and up. Okay, good. So it's important to think about that nice and easy, that simple piece. The oizuki feeling is a little different. So you can practice these chukuzukis a different way in terms of the hip action. This time, what you want to do is think of your acceleration phase, the part that goes to 80% of the technique being exactly the same as what you've just done. Okay? So it's going to go from here to here, my hips driving. But what I'm going to do for the last part is instead of here, and you see this all the time, people will suddenly think, oh, I've got to do something else with my hip, I've ran out of room. They'll rotate, extend the arm, and this rear hip, they pull backwards. Totally counterproductive, right? That means I come in, I hit my target, oh, I'm here, I'm about to knock its head off, and then I, oh. You've got to be here, and then from here, use this hip, drive off this leg second, so it's here, in, now drive off the opposite leg to push into the target at the end. Does that make sense? And you're going, oh my God, this is so different. It is not different. When you make oizuki naturally, you're here, you squeeze through the target. Notice how my hip naturally comes off center. It's not square. As I go. And then as I extend and drive the rear leg, that pushes this hip in and extends my target in. This is no different. This way. So if I had to accentuate my hip, it's kind of like I'm doing this for the first 80%, and then the last 20, this. This is the hip action I want. Here, there. Here, here. And if you watch my obi, it's going forward the whole time. It's going forward the whole time. In this, I'm rotating the spring bag and squeezing it down and slamming everything forward and into the target. Let's try it. Ready? You may need to go slow. That's totally cool. Itch might be just to feel the action, to feel both legs working. Don't be, look, Ma, I'm doing it. And pull your hip back. And ain't it. Forward. Forward. Into the target every time. Ready? Hey, itch, knee. Good. Now from here, working down. San, shi, go, ro, shi. Good. And up. Opposite side, right hand out. Itch, knee, san, shi, go, ro, shi. Good, and up. One more time. Kamae, try the oizuki. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shi. Very good. One more time. Hey, ich, ni, sam, shi, go, ro, shi. Good, and up. And relax. Okay, so vibration, when Steve Ubel talks about this, the way he describes it, and I like it, it's just mini rotations. Which brings us into our second way of moving, right? Second way of generating power from the hips. That's through rotation. So rotation, when you think about it, what you've got to be wary of is when we first learn it, it's on a single axis. It's like this. So what I can do is I can create weight and power from half my body, but at the end of the day, my center really moves net zero forward. It doesn't really come into the target. So what you can do is you can really think about rotating about either side of the body as we make these rotations. So when we look at this next group of movements, we've done our first two punches. Here I want to rotate in. Am I going to rotate through the center? No. I want to frickin' slam that door shut into that target. So when I drop, my weight is going to come down and I'm just going to continue. Then when I make my agyuke, where might I want to make that next rotation? Do I want to make it so that this is my axis here, this front hip, and I pull back? Right? Do I want to expand my center back to be able to slam the door shut and move in? Do I want to make it where I attack forward with the block? I make the rotation through this side and then slam the door shut here into the target. You know what I mean? You can change and play with that. And then when I make the rotation, the third rotation here, how am I going to do that? How am I going to make that strong? 2 ways by hand shotokan. Turn and expand in, or alternatively just turn on this and drive it in. Just drive it forward. We'll talk a little bit more about the differentiation between those in a little, yeah? But for now, what I want you to think about is make big rotation. Make big rotation. Big rotation. And be aware of where the knot of your belt is moving. Is it moving towards your target or away from the target as a product of that rotation? Okay? Right, let's try it. Hey, Yui. We've got our 2 punches. You already know what to work on there. Whichever one you choose is up to you. You might do one or the other, or you might do both. It's up to you. Gyakusuki feeling or oizuki feeling. I don't care. Hey, as long as you're working on something. Itch, knee. Now from here, big rotation. Think about it. Think about the axis you're rolling down. Hey, sun. Good. Now here, think about the hikite hand, the pulling hand. The hand that's all weird that everyone, all the keyboard warriors, think about. How does rotation work? Oh my goodness, hikite. Think about the hikite hand as simply pulling it back. Rip it back, use that to help the hip come back. Use it to help with your timing. Ish. Good, so use that. Now from here, Gyakusuki, slam the door shut. Knee. Good, now rotate in. Sun. We're gonna come back to these 2 in a minute. Then from here, oizuki, shi. Good, and up. Right side. Ish. Knee. Sun, big rotation. Big rotation. Shi. Go. Now from here, drive in. Oh. Shich. Good, enough. We'll talk more about it as we go. This time, as you make the rotations, something else that can help you maybe is don't think of the rotation as this. It's too slow. Think of it as opening your hips and closing your hips. Open, close. Expand and contract. Right? Use that to make the rotation. You'll find it'll happen faster. And then control which axis you're spinning, whether it's here, here, or here for this drill. All of them have purposes. All of the different axes that you use have a different purpose. Make sure you're picking the one you want. Right? If your goal is to stay in one place, stay in one place. If your goal is to drive your mass into the target, rotate in that way. If your goal is to pull your mass back to absorb the opponent in, rotate in a way to allow that to happen. Does that make sense? Be conscious of these things. Okay, here we go again. Think, expand, contract. So when I'm here and I've just finished this, I'm not thinking about this big sort of, whoa. I'm thinking of just here, opening my hips. Open to drive. Then from here, it's shut. Now I'm just gonna open here. Now I'm gonna shut. Does that make sense? Think of it this way. Here we go. Hands out. Your choice on these 2 vibrational movements. Ish, knee. Good. Now rotate down. Sun. Now open. Shi. Close. Go. Now forward. Rok. Shich. Good. And up. Right hand out. Ish, knee. Now rotate down. Open. Sun. And close it. Slam it shut. Open. Hutch. Q. Moving forward. Rok. Shich. Good. And I realize I can't count it all. I may as well just make noise. Okay, let's go again. One more time through that set. Think about the rotation. Hey, knee, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Moichido. Good. Some of you just check when you're in that hami. I remember when I was training with a lot of my Japanese instructors, they would tell me once, and then they would hit me. That was usually the sequence of events, right? And then if I ignored them after the hitty part, then they just didn't talk to me, ever, right, until I fixed it. So that was usually, sort of the 3 orders of events. Warn you because they kind of like you, hit you because they like you more, and then they ignore you because you're not listening to their advice. Make sure, so the reason I'm sort of saying that is I remember my hikate and my hip pull, especially going to mahame, right, in basic, it used to be sort of here, right? Really think about opening that up, really make this hand disappear, right? Because the further back you expand, the more movement I've got to be able to shift my center forward and backwards. I'm stretching my body, I'm building the fundamentals. When I'm in real time, I might not need that. But I want to, in basic, really think about this opening and having that room to close, right? Because it's not about your upper body. It's about how much drive you can direct from the leg to the hip and out through the hand. And you're developing that, right? In basic, in Kihon Waza. Okay, mochido. One more set. Hey, I'm gonna speed the counting up, just connecting techniques together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Good, and up. Again. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Very good. Excellent. So our last one is translation. Right? Translation is the idea of just freaking walking into somebody. Okay? And so there's 2 ways that you see this in this drill. From here, I've just finished my last gyatsuki. I can think about just simply driving off this leg. If I make this, and again, they end up combined. We'll talk about that in a minute. But as I drive here, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to push my body center and wrap together into that target. And really the big one with translation is the oizuki, thinking here, squeezing your legs together as you move and stepping straight in. A couple of things that are really important to watch here, especially on the oizuki, is as you step, check that your stance is not too wide. If you're out here at shoulder width, the classical sort of distance, you want it to be more hip wide, your stance. You want it a little narrower. The reason you don't want it hip wide is that now when I step through, it's going to do one of 2 things. Either, 1, I have to shift my center this way, and then to get it back in the direction I want, it has to go this way. That's not into my target. The second thing, if I refuse to do that and keep my center here, watch this knee. It collapses. And that will eventually cause knee injuries later on as you train. So what you want to do is you want to be Kermit the Frog doing karate. You want this knee straight up and down here, and then when you make that squeeze, it's just a matter of me turning my hips up. No torque on the knee, and my center goes straight in. So really think about that as you make that drive. Really think about that simple point, because that's critical to creating the chain to drive this leg straight into your target. Secondly, if you're wide, if you notice here, the power generation is actually through a hole. So I've set it up so my hip is right over this blue line. That's where my power generation is coming in. It's going to come in, down, through this hip. And where it wants to go is straight down this blue line. There's nothing there supporting it. So what I want to do is shift this foot in. Now I've got a straight line from floor, hip, up, out to my target. So when I hit, the reinforcement's going to go straight to my heel, not through a hole. Okay? Right, so let's try again. So this time really think about mainly the oizuki. We're going to come back to the move before in a little while. But really think about that oizuki. So we're here, hip vibration, however you want to do it. Hitch, knee. Now big rotations. Think about which axis, think about the timing, think about the movement as you go from shomen to hami and so forth. Hitch, down. Knee, sam. Now drive it forward, san. Now think about your oizuki, move straight towards your target, think fist to the target. Shi. Good, and up. Right hand out. Hey. Ich. Knee. Some. She. Hips back. Go. Push. Rock. Shich. Step through. Boom. Good. And coming up. So just be wary. Just a little comment. Make sure that in your oizuki that you're really using that driving leg. Right? So I was training. I do morning trainings with a group. Right? And normally I'm just wearing gi pants. And I realized why I have trouble finding jeans that fit me in the US. It's because my ass is too big. Okay, from here to here, it's like massive. And I just think of the syndrome that poor Matt has to go through, right? So, you know, as you're here, you want to have this weight. You've got to use this big muscle. If you make oizuki and you do not engage this rear hip forward, that's where the drive is coming from. If I let this relax and it forms an angle, now it's going through the side of my butt. I'm losing all of this engagement here. It becomes this through a much set of weaker muscles. So the way that you can check to see if you're actually engaging your gluteus maximus in the technique, once you finish the oizuki, hand, bum. And what you should feel is that should feel solid. There should be a nice little crease underneath where your fingers just go underneath, right? That checks that this is engaged correctly in the technique. If it's here and it's kind of soft, you're not engaging. Does that make sense? So you want that drive off this leg. It's all about this back driving leg making that drive, right? Okay, let's try again. Hey. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rock, shich. Check it. Good, and up. Good. Try again. Other side, right hand out. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rock, shich. Check. Good, and up. Okay, so really simple. So this particular drill, right, what it's looked at is it's looked at the three major ways that you can move the hips in Shotokan, right? Translation through the oizuki, vibration through these two standing up here, right? And rotation, especially here, here, and here. But that's not all. Those are not the only ways you can move your hips in karate to generate power. You can divide some of these up. So when you look at rotation, for example, rotation can be divided in two ways, and you're already kind of doing it. If the hip and body move together, right? See how they're moving this way? That is called direct rotation. If they go in opposite directions, that is called reverse rotation. Okay, so these are alternative ways to think about these actions. So here, what we've got now is we have oizuki, vibration. We now have direct rotation. Boom. Now we have reverse rotation. Or if we change the technique, what we can make it here is this is a direct rotation. Boom, up. Now direct in again. Now we're going to do reverse rotation. I'm going to force you to do this in the Heian Shodan-esque way. Okay, it's going to slow us down a little bit, but that's okay. My drill, I can make you do what I want, right? So as we go now, to suit the story, I want you to rotate up, come square. Just like Heian Shodan, then from here, drive forward, opening your hip up in reverse rotation. It's a little awkward, but this is the feeling that you want, right? You want that nice sort of here, you just done Yatsuki, rotate, push, and open. And this is really good practice for kata like Jion and so forth, yeah? And then, of course, we have good old-fashioned translation afterwards, stepping through and punching. So, what you're going to think about now is the idea of direct rotation, use it each time, boom, boom, right? Then think about reverse rotation. I'll show you some drills that you can do in your own time if you want to practice this again. How you can add in direct and reverse and all that kind of stuff separately. Does that make sense? Okay, and it's a simple change. Okay, so from here, ich, ni. Now think about direct rotation. Feel the body, hand move in concert with each other to drive everything into that target. Some, good. Now from here, feel the arm and the elbow and the hip driving in. Shi. Good. Now feel it all drive and slam home again. San. Now rotate, square it and push it. Ich. Now oizuki. San. Good, and up. Man, I totally really should just grunt instead of counting, right? Because I obviously can't count to 10 in Japanese in order anyway. Okay, let's go again. Hey, right hand. Ich, ni, sam. Feel that direct rotation. Feel here. Shi, go. Now square it. Rok, then push. Good, and step. Shich. Good, and up. So again, it feels weird. But you do it in hand shodan, you do it in jion. Splat, 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 right? We're here, making that rotation. We actually do similar kind of hip actions. That one's with a direct movement. We sometimes do it with the garambarai and hand shodan. But that sort of double feeling of hip is actually quite common in many kata. One more time, ready? This way, and then I'm going to just make one simple change just to bring this home a little further. Ich, ni, sam. Drop down. Shi, go, rok. Square it and push. That's it. Rok, step. Good, and up. Right hand out. If you just did your left, just put your right out. If you just did your right, do your left. You all can't see each other properly. You're just looking at me staring at you. So, just, you're okay. I'm not taking points. Just do the other side. Ich, ni, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good, and up. Good. So from here, we're going to do one change. We're going to change it from a direct, the agyuke, from a direct rotation technique to a reverse rotation technique. And again, the concept of direct and reverse rotation is strictly controlled by which way you're turning and facing. Does that make sense? So I'm calling it direct, if you're square and I make garambarai, that's reverse rotation. If I'm square and I make agyuke, that's direct rotation, right? If I make uchuke, it's reverse. If I make sotuke, it's together. But if I'm turning, if I'm coming to you and doing sotuke like in Basadai, it can be reverse rotation. You know what I mean? It just varies. It just depends on what you're doing at the time. For now, I'm loosely calling direct and reverse just because of how we're starting. So how this is going to look is going to be here, 1, 2, we turn, this time from here, just like uchuke. Okay? Then yakuzuki. Then rotate in, make it reverse rotations, turn, push, and then step forward. Does that make sense? So all we've done is we've just flipped it from being direct to reverse, feel the hip action, feel it change, everything's good, yeah? So from here, mate. Ich, ni, now down, san. Now from here, uchuke, but feel the hip pop. Shi, good, now go. Now feel it pop. Rok, twist, push. Good, hach. Good, and up. And notice how it just changes the flavor of the drill, right? Something very simple, but notice that. Now, a couple of things that are important here is when you make that gyaksu, when you make the uchuke, don't turn and you got no drive behind, you got no legs. Remember, everything's driven by the legs and the hips. So here, cover, make the cover here. Then use at the business end. Does that make sense? For today. Remember, this is a Kihon-based drill. Okay, it's a basic base drill. So keep the movements basic. You can totally later, when I've got soft stances and all this, I can totally change it to however I want. Right, I can switch and change those, but at the moment, I'm keeping it square, I'm keeping it basic. So feel, load, then drive. And again, you're rotating, right? I can control this way, this way, this way. If I want to drive forward into them, because this is the block and I'm just punching them in the face, I can change it here, right? To rotating off here. If I want to absorb them and bring them past me, I can rotate here. right? You can play with that. You don't need to be stuck, right, as you go. So everything we said before still counts. Left hand forward. Ich, ni, sam, shi, yo, uchike, go, up, square it out, shich, and up. Right hand out. Ich, ni, sam, now uchike, shi, go, up, shich, good, and up. One more. A ich, ni, sam, shi, go, up, shich, good, and up. Hey, again, opposite side. Ich, ni, san, shi, go, up, shich, and step. Oh, there you go, good, and up. Good, so what we've got here, and you can notice how we've added in sort of choices, right? It's your training. I'm not in the room with you to sort of scream at you and say you need to fix this or fix that. What you've got to do is you've got to listen to your body, be honest about what's hard, and work on the hard bits. Does that make sense? That's how you get better, right? Not just by mind saying, oh, Swanson's just doing this. Waste of time. You've got to pick on yourself. So, for this first part, whether you're doing it this way or this way, up to you. If you're here doing this drive, that should be normal. If you find direct rotation hard, drive. If you find the reverse rotation hard and you're having trouble with the timing, practice. It's up to you, I don't mind. If you find from here the reverse rotation hard, then square it. Square it and push. If you find the direct rotation version hard, just drive it in. And then make sure your oizuki is good. Make sure your timing is spectacular. Right? I'm here, and as I step, make sure it's not this. Make sure it's this, straightening and pushing together as it drives into the target. All of these little things matter. And you can use these drills to build that, which will permeate through all of your karate. But there's one more way to move the hips. So, do the drill any way you want, well, within these confines, but we've got one more way. Coupled with translation, there's two ways you can translate your hips. You can either do them horizontal to the ground or vertically, up and down. Right? And the first time you encounter this really is in Heian Sanda. Using that lifting action, right, to drive that technique in. From here, what we're going to use, well, actually you see it in Heian Shodan or any first move of any kata, but the first time it's sort of embedded in one is Sanda. What I want you to think about now is how, not only how you rotate your hip, but think about how you're making use of that dropping action, the dropping momentum of the hip as you make that drive. Does that make sense? So I want you to think about that. That is elevation. So what we have now is we have 5 ways to use our hips to be able to make power into our target. You have vibration, you have translation, you have elevation, you have direct rotation, and you have reverse rotation. Okay? All of those matter. So you can see we took the JK3, we put it out to 5. Okay? And those are the major ways. So, let's go through the whole drill, thinking about precisely in this drill, which one of those you're going to use, where and when and why. Right? Okay, let's go. Basic drill, but a lot to unpack. Hey. Ich, ni, san, shi, go, ro, shi. Good, and up. So now suddenly the movement is no longer just a set of techniques, but rather different ways to move the hips and use hip action. That's what's important. That's what we're getting at today. Try again, other side, right hand out. Ich, ni, san, push, Shi, go, ro, shi, and up. Good. Okay, from here, 3 minutes. Try it in your own time. Try different variations. Do you know what I mean? Experiment with yourself. Try different ways. Some of them you may go, okay, I'm going to make it all direct rotation. Some you may add in some reverse rotation. Right? Think about those. And the other piece is, yeah, just really think about the hips at this point. That connection of what each one's doing, and be definitive in your decision. Okay? Right, off you go, about two minutes or so. Go through just one side then the other. Good. Hey, Matt, just after you finish the one you're doing, just come up. So finish out that rep. Good. So something, just looking around, okay, and this is just, you know, whenever I'm in big classes, you know, when I'm teaching live, I find that I end up just, you know, sort of talking to everyone. And there's some people in the room that go, oh, that's certainly not me. And then there's other people in the room where they listen to everything. If something comes out, always ask yourselves, right, is it me that he's talking to, right? Because that introspection is important. So I'm going to use this ball. This little ball here is basically your body center. Here it is here. Okay? And my Seika tandem, technically, is if I could get this ball about an inch below my navel, so my belly button's here, about an inch below, right where the knot of my belt is. That's why it normally sits a little bit lower. And if I could get this and I could push it into me so that it sits right on the surface of my skin, but the center of the ball is about here, that's the place that you want to think about. That's what people often refer to as your Seika tandem, your center, right? This idea, your hara, right? As they go. Controlling this to put it in the direction that you want is the purpose of every single hip movement that you ever do. Okay? That's why we do it, is to push this ball into your target, or around your target, or away from your target. At the end of the day, this is all that matters. When you're doing that unsu jump, you don't want this to be going, because guess what? That unsu jump is going to be a cluster. You want that unsu jump to be this. Right? So, with that in mind, think about how this ball would move. If I'm here and I'm just putting it down here, I'm just doing extension of my body center here. If I'm doing these first two movements, boom, boom. What I want is I want this ball to go boom, boom, straight towards you. Nowhere else, just in. I want to hit my target ahead, i.e. you, in. Make it bigger, boom, this. Okay? Whether I do it gyakuzuki feel, or I do it oizuki feel, it doesn't matter. It's just this pushing into you. Right? When I do this next movement, what I want to do is I want to lower the ball, and I want the ball to move not like this. See how my ball moved? It went like this. Is that towards you? I want the ball to move straight to you. You see what I mean? All I'm doing is making the ball roll along the floor like this. Now, when I do these rotations, boom, I've come in. Now when I do these rotations, I may want to push the ball in, and then I may want to push it in a little further, Or I may want to push the ball back and have it come back in, right? I might want it to do it this. I may want it to do this. It's up to me, right? When I do the next movement, I want this ball to drive whether I'm coming straight in here or I'm just driving in. I want it to come straight towards you. And when I do oizuki, I want it to just do, watch me mess this up, I just want it to go straight into you. Not, it needs to go from this leg driving straight into you. Does that make sense? So really think about where this is going and how the hips and the various ways you're moving them contribute to that. Because that's where your power derives. It doesn't come from the hips, it comes from the legs. But it's how you control this is what creates that power. Does that make sense? And you've got to break it down, right? So use this drill again. You've got another 1 minute. Think about that. And whichever way you're moving, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's direct or reverse or whatever kind of hip rotation, as long as it's achieving that end goal. Okay? Off you go. Ready? Hey, you off you go. Hey, hashmek. Yeah, so Amanda, as you move, especially with your oizuki, watch it that your elbow isn't disconnecting and coming wide. Keep here, think this all together, you know what I mean? Have that feeling. Don't make it so much about up here. Just push this, boom, and this hits. Okay? Another 1 minute, keep going. Good. Good. Hey, amen. Any questions? Easy? This should be hard, right? It's about fundamental karate, and trust me, I work on this all the time, right? It's those baby steps, as Yaguchi Sensei says, that really matter. So from here, 1 minute break, and then we'll move on to the Tekki kata, and let's talk about different ways to generate power besides these classic 5 ways of Shotokan. 1 minute break, off you go. Yeah, and Ship Hangetsu actually is one of those really cool, different examples, because your purpose in the kata, of course, is not to move along that linear path. It's kind of cool that way. You actually don't move your body center straight in, it covers that beautiful curve, which is in the name. So it's one of those really cool exceptions, which is also important. Having that control of center to be able to make those curves becomes really important. Okay, so let's move on. So what I want to do is we're going to go through Tekki Shodan, Nidan, Sandan, because really, you know, we get Tekki Shodan shoved down our throats, you know, when we're brown belts, we'll say, oh my God, this kata sucks, right? Well, I don't know, you might like it, lots of people don't. But it's the same thing with Tekki Nidan, right? Tekki Nidan to me is just, it took me a long time to get it. And Tekki Sandan, everyone's like, But let's talk about it in terms of power generation. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the elephant in the room with those kata, right? These kata are characteristic, especially in Shotokan, because they're all done in kibidachi. And what kibidachi does is it restricts hip movement. It's about stopping. And if you're in my Tuesday night class last week, it was this idea where you just simply can't move. They still can move, kind of, but really they're restricted by this beautiful bridging structure. And that's done for a purpose. Okay? Because Tekki Shodan, Tekki Nidan, Tekki Sandan is suddenly how do you generate power from being able to move the hips very little or not at all. And that's what this comes in. And without using any translation. So those classic 5 ways of generating power become more and more difficult in Tekki Shodan, Tekki Nidan, Tekki Sandan. And that's what they get at. They really think about this internal energy. And again, this came up from a comment, again, towards my book, right? You know, on the whole, I've had very, very positive feedback on it. But, you know, this was one thing. I'm like, wow, they're right. You know, so you continue to learn and you continue to train and you figure out other stuff out. That's the beauty of this, right? So let's do Tekki Shodan first. Everybody here should know it, I think, just looking through the group. I'm going to do it facing this way to start with. And so from here, hey, oi, hey, ich, ni, sam, hi, bok, bok, shi, hach, kyu, ju, ich, ni, sam, shi, bok, ich, ni, sam, shi, bok, ho, shi, hach, kyu, ju, ich, ni, sam, shi. Young man. Good, everyone remembers? Flash. Okay, so Tekki Shodan, when I think of it as this way to create a little bit of movement. To me, it's like doing all these tricky movements, but doing them like this. And at the very beginning of class, one of the first things we thought about was the confluence of oizuki and gyakuzuki, oizuki. Thinking about that action, again I'm making it big so you can see it, but making that action. Tekki Shodan is all about that. It's about coordinating these incredibly freaking little hip movements that you've got into these big arm actions. So when we look at it, so what I want you to do, and we've done this bigger one, I think I've put it out on my 15 minutes of fun web series. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to skip that step. We're just going to do it straight in the kata because I've only got about half an hour to cover 3. Right, but I want to give you that flavor. So from here, hey, make your way. What I want you to think about is, and I'm going to come right up to the camera. Think about as you step, you make that first drop. Drive your hip into the target. See how as I make the high shoot that my hip moved with it. Now from here, I'm going to make that full rotation of my hip. Here. My hip's going to rotate. When I drop, it's going to release. This is going to come forward. It's going to rotate. It's going to continue to rotate as I go round. It's about connecting your hip with the rotation within these smaller pieces. Does that make sense as you do this? It's not just about, or worse, it's all got to move with it. Does that make sense? So feel the elbow to hip connection as you move through these movements, as you move through the kata. We'll do it across the whole kata. For Tekki Nidan, Tekki Sandan, we don't need to so much. I can show you with the first couple of movements what I want. So from here, hey, yo. Right. So each step, knee, think about the action of the movement and where it's going. Think about how the hip and the elbow are connected. Now from here, use this rear leg to drive into the target, but maintain kibidachi, right? Drive it in, the hip will push, but then take the rest of the movement up with this rotation. That's going to be important later when we go into Tekki Nidan. Now from here, just let it relax. This hip is going to come forward. One of the potential applications of the preparatory of going into the koshikamae is that you've just hit them in the head, bang, with the empi. You grab hold of their head and you pop their head straight off the hip. Right? So you're basically hip butting them. One potential application. So here, two. Now from here, feel the elbow and the hip move together. Now feel the elbow and the hip move together. Good. Now step across. Each. Lift. Make. Gyaku hamae. Not square. Let it relax. Now use hip, hip, hip through the action. Let the hip relax into the technique. All the while, I'm listening to my body center, right? Move forward, reverse back, because I want to pull them into me, but driving this hip forward, then driving both to that target. You see what I mean? How I'm still using everything I learned from the beginning of class today in this kata. Hey, each, boom, boom, boom. Now from here, feel the leg lifts, turn the hip, then drive it down into your target. At the same time, you've lost it. That's like making gyakuzuki. Like this. Feel, lift, turn. Now the same, the opposite side. Knee, lift, drive. Now from here, let it pop. Now expand the whole bloody lot into the target. And again, these are not big rotations, they're little, but they drive all the same. Now expand it. 1. Same deal. 2, 3, 4, 5. Step, lift, drop, make hami, shomen, hami, shomen. Rotate, lift, drop, drop, push, and up. Does this make sense? So what I'm doing, just the same way as what we're doing with bigger motion, is we're thinking about this ball. We're thinking about how, boom. Now I'm going to push my center in, boom. Now I'm going to let it go, boom. It moves forward a little bit to the side. Makes sense. Now I'm going to turn it, boom. Now I'm going to turn it. You see what I mean? One of the things, if you ever get the good chance to train with Steve Ubel, what you notice is that person, that human, one of the things he points out is that you do not need to move your hips a large distance to generate power. It only needs to go an inch or two. And that's exactly what Tekki teaches you. It's teaching you to coordinate these micro rotations with these very large kind of hand movements, but very connected hand movements, because they're all connected beautifully to the hip. It's all balanced. It's all, you know what I mean? It's a beautifully balanced kata to teach you how to do this with both hands and have them both in and both moving. Let's try it again. Hey, so just thinking through, we're going to work through it slowly. 1 move, 1 count. Think about the action you want with your hip each time. Hey, each, knee, sam, shi, go, rok, shi, hach, kyu, ju, ich, knee, sam, shi, go, rok, shich. Good. Hach, expand it out. Kyu, ju, ich, knee. Good. Sun step. Shi, bo, go, rok, shich, hach, kyu, ju, ich, knee, sam, and up. Good. And you know, if you sort of dig back, I'm sure I've got it somewhere. I also know Scott Langley also did it. You can also, think about this kata as being, zenkuts, shomen, hami, shomen, You know what I mean? As you go, you can actually extend the stance to Zenkuts to increase that hip action if you want to sort of understand how and why your hips move. Doing it in the stance is restricting the hip. That's the point. That's what the kata's after. But to understand the hip movement, sometimes you've got to make it bigger. Feel free to do that. This is your karate. So let's move on. You get the idea with Tekki Shodan then, yeah? This idea of coordinating hip with elbow with body. Tekki Nidan works on a completely different set of movements. So what we're going to do is let's do a kata we all know, just to start off with. I want us to practice just from here, this one move out of Han Yondan. Oh, okay, take care, Mike, good to see you. So from here, we've just made the Shuto, then Shuto each. Now from here, what I want you to do is I want you to make the kick, then expand up, lift high through the chest, and then feel that expand down. Now, what I don't want you to do is this. I don't want you to, man, I got them good. I want you to fire in with the hip. I want you to be underneath here and feel rather this expansion here, make this really big, and then feel your ribs close like a piano accordion to make that drive. So all of you that have sat Shodan, at least within ISKF, we're here, we do this expansion, then we contract. And a lot of people just make it empty. Use this to squeeze down, then make the throw. Okay? So let's just try Han Yondan. Each knee. San, kick, switch. Make this big, then feel the whole thing just like a piano accordion. Try again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more time. Each knee. San, shigo, ro. And the only movement I'm interested in is this. Okay? That's it. That's the only feeling. So that's one that's important. The second one is also here. And yeah, we'll do it this way. So from here, make Sorchindachi. So if you don't know the stance, make Zenkuts, make Kibadachi, squash it. And I've done a whole bunch of classes recently on Sorchindachi. But from here, push in with this hip. Now what I want you to do is with that push, this drive of this leg, expand the other hand out and just pull it. And so what you notice is that from this hip here pushing forward, this leg acting as a brake, and then this rotation, notice how you can feel kind of like the stretch between here and my hip. Right? Now just let it go. So what you should feel is you should feel your insides from here to here twisting like a rag. Like I'm getting this belt and I'm scrunching it up. And so what I want to do is let it go and it releases. So what we're going to do here is imagine that I'm here, hold the stance, a nice wide one, so it's a good one to sort of get this feeling, and push. So keep here, this will stop, right? There's a hard stop here based on my flexibility. Take the rest of it up, here, right? And I can't fill my lungs all the way up because I'm twisted. Then just let it go. And this is the feeling that you want in Sorchin. Right, is that beautiful twisting and then just let it go. So you're here, then let go. Now from here, just step forward, expand out the other side. So don't let, when you do this, you see this all the time. People will be here, they let this back leg go and they just sort of drop. Don't. It's about this leg actively pushing into the stance. This, Sorchindachi, watch. Holy crap, it's called Kutsudachi. Who would have ever thought? Where your front leg is pushing in actively into the back leg to create the construction. Turn it over, turn the hip around, and make that same drive off this leg. In, in. This is a wall because the foot's turned. Stops. Now, add the spring. Then let it go. So what you notice is that when I make that drive, I'm not, I don't need to do all this sort of fancy stuff. All I need to do is just let this tension go as I make the drive. Okay? This is another way of making energy, making power. It's through this twisting action. And you see it all the time. Jite is full of this. We did a class on Jite a couple of weeks ago. Right? This kind of twist and then let it unravel. Twist and let it unravel. Tekki Nidan is all about that. And the last thing is this idea of expanding, contracting, of twisting and using one side of the body to make that power. Does that make sense? That's what Tekki Nidan teaches you. But to do it without moving, to do it in a restricted stance like Kibadach, it develops that kind of core power. This. So let's do the first few movements and let's talk about how each, just within the first sort of half the kata, right? How that, just those parts, develop all of that, and then it develops it further through the rest of the kata. But we just need to do the first part here today. So from here, yoi, make yoi at the beginning. So you're here. What I want from you is as you go, I want you to come together, bring your elbows together, and I want you to lift through your shoulders. What you're going to notice, without letting your shoulders come up, right, keeping them down, you're going to notice there's a huge stretch across your back. The other thing you notice is you notice your rib cage kind of goes and opens. Right, the intercostal stretch. Stretch. Then what you're going to do is as you're here, and as the knee lifts, right, I'm stretched up, now let it come down. So you're stretching the rib cage and then letting it all drop. The same feeling as what you did, but just on one side. Now you're doing it on both. So let's just try just that move. Ready? Hey, each stretch and drop. And it's got to be, yeah, you can feel it. It's like you're putting a big thing of water and it's not through your arms, it's through all of this dropping into place. And it's coupled all together with the leg movement, the arm movement, the lot. One more time. Each. Good. Now from here, the next movement, as you step across, we're going to create that twist. So as you go, feel, keep your hip. When you go, there's going to be a sort of a want to sort of turn everything, right, from hip down. What I want you to do is keep this strong, push this hip forward, but the shin pushing into my left leg is going to stop this hip from moving. Then use, so now what I've done is I've created a stretch this way across my body. Then let it go. See how that makes it stronger. So you're winding the spring each time. You're winding the spring by either expanding and then dropping it down and locking it on one side. Then you're winding the spring this time this way and then letting it go and connecting it on the one side. This is what Tekki Nidan's about. It's about developing that kind of power. Notice it's not using the hips. It's using this and it's using this to generate that power. Does that make sense? Let's try it again. Hey. Here. So, feel the chest expand. Each knee. Good. Then san, feel. Make that twist. Shi. Twist. Now up. Now we're going to do the other side, otherwise we'll end up weird and unbalanced. 1, 2, 3, twist. Feel it. Push. Opposite ways with the hips. Now let it go. Good. Can everyone feel that? Feel what I'm getting at? So it's very important. What you find, a lot of people when they do this kata, they simply just hear. But there's so much more internally that's going on. And what it's going to do is for a while, if you're practicing this way, the kata is going to get ugly. Like it's going to be fugly, right? And what will happen is as you become more comfortable with making this action, The kata becomes now, I can now make that drive and derive that energy from that wind the spring and go. But you've got to learn how to do it first. Does that make sense? There's never anything wrong with taking half a step back to develop the internal power that you want. Okay? Let's do it 2 more times, then move on to Sandan. But the whole of Tekki Nidan is about those kinds of feelings. Compressing to one side, creating that unequal twist to drive in, creating this and this. The whole kata is about that. And if you look at the rest of the moves, those who know it, it becomes clear. Hey, from here. Aichi, ni, san, stretch, shi, one, push. Go, stand up. This should feel, so comfy. Now bring the strain on. Each. Now knee, expand, and push. Good, and up. One more time. Ready? Again, as you practice more, initially it'll be kind of jerky, disjointed, but as you practice more into these and get used to these feelings, it smooths out more and more and more and becomes flowy, which is how Tekki Nidan is. But you've got to develop the feeling first, not just waving your arms, right? So many people out there just wave their arms. It's about this feeling inside that you want to develop, this internal feeling, whether it's your hips, stretching, so forth. Right, let's go. Ready? One more time. Each, knee, san, wind the spring, then let it go. Shi, let it go. Each, wind it, drop it. Then wind it, drop it. Good, hey, amen. So notice how this is a very different feeling from Tekki Shodan, isn't it? Right? But you can see how this is a natural extension of that. Because in order to do all of this and do this together, you've got to have an understanding of being able to move the hips within the kata, within these limited ranges. Right? So Tekki Shodan is a prerequisite for Tekki Nidan. Let's do Sandan. Tekki Sandan now is really unique because what it does is the other 2 kata have support hands usually all the way through, so you can engage both sides. Tekki Shodan, as I mentioned before, was very balanced. Tekki Sandan really it works out kind of in a balanced way initially, but then it loses that balance and requires everything sort of from a single arm. And what the kata gets at is you've got to have the vibration that you had in Tekki Shodan. You've got to have the ability to compress on one side and use these expansions here. But what it adds is it adds this action. And if you've trained with Scott Langley at all, this is something he really thinks about a lot, right? And so when you're with him, he's and so it's about this sort of action. And Tekki Sandan uses this looser shoulder piece into the kata, and that's what Tekki Sandan develops, right? It coordinates your hips through Tekki Shodan, makes these squeezes and the lifting and dropping and using of this power, and then the third piece to layer in is this use of the arm in these kinds of goofy ways. Does that make sense? That's how they build. And this is why you need them in a triumphant, because you use all of these actions in other kata. Right? These are incredibly important training kata. So let's just think about just this action to start with. And I could pick any random technique. The one I'm going to use is hand sandan. So from here, we've just done the first movement. From here, think. As you load, squeeze. Now don't just think about here, and I'm going to make uchuke, gerambarai, and you're here and you just go. Rather, what I want you to squeeze, but don't squeeze from your elbows. Bring your elbows together. Right, so that might be one way to do it. Another way, if you want, is just squeeze your shoulders in and then let them expand. Let them pull out. So the movement is not this, but rather this expansion. So let's try, ready? Itch, squeeze, then let it go. Up. Now squeeze, now let it go. This is half the action that you need. We're going to go into another one in a minute. But it creates this in and then out to neutral. In and out to neutral, not back. We're going to get to the back bit in a minute. Here, 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 here. So let's try. Ready? Each, 1, 2, 3, squeeze, 4. Good. So it's no longer just your arms doing this. It's now your whole body, and watch me from the side. It's this. It's this that I'm using to make that action. I'm using my pecs and my backs. My pecs are a hugging muscle. I'm using those here. And then my back muscles. I'm using those here. Not just my arms. But, you see? This is what you want. And again, without any of this, just this. This. And to do it, you've got to have vibration, blah, 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 all of these other pieces. Let's try just a few. Ready? Ich, knee. Good. From here, let's carry on. Sun, shi, go. Good, and relax. Try it again. Again, think about this. Ich, knee, shoulders, some shoulders. Good, opposite side. Sheep, go, roll. Good, and relax. So a way to do it, sort of, if you're not sort of thinking about it, just bring your elbows together. That forces this to close. You know what I mean? It's whatever floats your boat. Another one where you see this quite often is, of course, in Nijishihon, right? And so that's the Owaseuke, right? Here, just before bang, then turning and pushing in. So using this kind of action, this uses the whole piece. This uses the back and forward. So don't be afraid here. We're just going to practice it. Make Sanshindachi. So here, you know, toe 1 foot forward, bring it out, push the heel out, bend the knees, squeeze up through the center. And from here, just load and squeeze back. Feel that stretch. Now from here, push forward. Ish. 1 high, 1 low. Then pull. Then push. Now pull. Then push. So this has almost no hip action at all, right? It has a little bit of a compress, but really it's all through the shoulders that make this action. It's not just my arms going, but it's my shoulders pulling and pushing through. Does that make sense? As you develop more, you think about integrating Tekki Shodan and Tekki Nidan, and then you can drive the hip in after. But really it's about this coupling with the compression here. You don't want it to just be arms, shoulders, 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 shoulders. So ways you can develop this is it works best as a spring system. If you want to work on the backwards part, start here and then push. If you want to work on the pushing forward part, start here, this. You know what I mean? And you can then start to build it as you want. You know what I mean? So this is the training to be able to develop that. Let's put it in the context of Tekki Sandan. So from here, Hayoi. Those who don't know it, don't worry, I'm making it up as I go. I don't know it either. From here, nice and relaxed, think. Holy crap, look at the first movement in Tsuchuke. Look at my shoulders. Huh, how about that? Now, oh, look at my shoulders. How about that? Look at my shoulders. Look at my shoulders. Now one side. This is as far as we're going to go in the kata, right? But the whole thing uses now, instead of before, now, of course, right? It's this idea of boom, use. You see what I mean? It's using this to develop the kata. So let's try again. Hayoi. first two movements, or first three movements, are basically this. Together. Ready? 1, compress, let it go. Compress, let it go. Compress. Now from this compression point, right, and some people do this as a drop. For us, we make it a sotuke. This is how it was. Yaguchi sensei was very clear. He went back to his notes from 1957 or whenever he was in the Japanese instructor's course. Right, he was in the second intake. In the notes it was this, not this. So, but do what you want, both are fine. The principle's the same. Well, here, now, just the shoulder. Leave this one here and strong and in front of you. Now make the same actions with the shoulder as it goes. So what I'm doing here is I'm not just moving my arm, I'm moving my shoulder in the action. You see what I mean? So I'm using this and it's isolated on one side, which is really stinking hard. Let's try it from the beginning. 1, compress, relax. 2, compress. 3, across. 4, 1, big shoulder, big shoulder, big shoulder, big shoulder, relax. You see? One more time. Compress, this. 1. Now, 2, 3, forward. So your shoulder should be forward here. Not just your arm move, but my shoulder moves. Now expand it back. Boom. Now expand it forward. Now expand it back. Now expand it forward. Then relax it. You see? And so when you do this quickly, it isn't just this, there's nothing there. It's about big. You see what I mean? It's about developing this whole piece. And that's not covered in Shotokan, but yet, guess what? I'm doing Jion. 1, 2, 3. See how I use that? Right there. The Tekki kata force you to isolate these pieces time and time again that you use in every other kata that you do. And so this brings us full circle, right? When you do movement and when you generate power, it's never just vibration. It's never just translation. It's never just rotation. They're coupled. Often, when I do oizuki, it's translation coupled with vibration. Rotation coupled with vibration, coupled with that expansion of the shoulder. When I drop down here in hand yonder, it's about this expansion dropping down, connecting in direct rotation and translation with elevation tied in. And so knowing how they connect and how you move your center and how you use the classic ways, vibration, reverse rotation, direct rotation, right? Elevation, translation, shoulder action, expansion and twisting of the torso, and coupling it with the action which you learn in Tekki Shodan. That's how you generate power in Shotokan. Those are a big bunch of ways that you do it. And you've done this all the way through your career. It's just putting the names onto it. It's about coupling that in. Okay? Hey, arms forward. Other way. Out and back. Good, Zenkatsu. Ball the foot. And heel. Switch. Ball the foot. And heel. Good. Just relaxing forward. And push back. Good, over one side and the other. Good, and up. And so let's stop here. As always, thank all of you for coming, right? It's nice to see new people. It's nice to see old people. Right, well, wait a minute, not old people, people who come frequently. There we go, that makes me feel better. You know, it motivates me in training, just I hope it does you. So with that, have an awesome Sunday. I'll see you whenever I see you next. Hey, with Super Dutch. Hey, woes. Thank you all very much. I hope you had fun.